Bonjour, je m'appelle Maisie, j'ai 17 ans et le printemps dernier, l'Alliance française m'a envoyé à la France pour faire de la recherche sur les marques d'affection publiques. Alors, c'est mon projet.
Hello and bonjour. My name is Maisie and I'm a French student from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I started learning French my freshman year, and since then I've tried to immerse myself in the language and culture as much as possible. I read French books, I listen to French music, I've even watched a couple seasons of Emily in Paris, so I'm pretty much an expert. However, one thing that's always stood out to me about French culture is how open they are about love and affection. As someone who grew up going to Catholic school in Oklahoma, this openness is very foreign to me. Thus, it was quite the culture shock when I went to France my sophomore year for an exchange and saw people kissing in public. So, when I got the chance to go to France to conduct a research project, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And if you're seeing this, that means it was a success. In this video, I will address and answer two major questions. First, do the French really engage in public displays of affection, or PDA, more than Americans do? And second, if so, in what ways and why? Now, without further ado, on y va! Phase 1 consists of the observation period. For 7 days before I went to France, I wrote down every single public display of affection I witnessed and then what I was doing when I witnessed them. Next, I rated each display of affection on a scale from 1 to 5, depending on whether it was romantic or platonic. At the end of each day, I added up all the scores for a total PDA score. Then I repeated the process in France. On day 1, I filmed a short film in the Paseo Arts District, and then immediately afterwards went and performed at a cultural showcase called Rhythm of the World. This day was by far my busiest day, with a total platonic PDA score of 7.5, a total romantic PDA score of 4, and an overall PDA score of 11.5. On day 2, I went to the Asian market to go grab some ingredients for my lunch, and then I stopped by a bakery for a sweet treat. On day 3, I woke up bright and early to work on some homework at my favorite cafe. I went to school for half the day and then I started to feel sick, so I went home. I saw no PDA on either day, giving both an overall PDA score of 0. On day 4, I went back to the cafe before heading to school and then to dance class. The day ended with a platonic PDA score of 4 and a romantic PDA score of 0.5, adding up to an overall PDA score of 4.5. On day 5, I went to the same cafe before going to school and then a doctor's appointment. The overall PDA score was 4.5 with a platonic score of 2.5 and a romantic score of 2. On day 6, I went to the cafe, school, and then I got a haircut. The platonic score was 2 and the romantic score was 0, making the overall score 2. On day 7, I went to the cafe and school again. The platonic score was 2 and the romantic score was 1, so the overall score was 3. And with that, my observation days in the States came to an end. Finally, I packed up all my stuff, said goodbye to my dog, and got on a plane to France. On day 1 of observation in France, we landed in Paris at about 7 a.m. and then met up with our correspondents. I didn't sleep all that much on the plane, so maybe the tiredness hindered my observational skills, but this day had a really unusually low PDA score compared to the other days in France. The platonic score was 2 and the romantic score was 0, so the overall score was 2. On day 2, we took a tour of the high school and then spent the rest of our day in class with our correspondents. This was the day that I first came into contact with the common culprits. I kid you not, this couple, who somehow was in every single one of my classes, could not keep their hands off of each other. They were like the PDA final boss, but nobody around me seemed to notice or care. Anyway, the platonic score was 20.5, the romantic score was 42.5, and the overall score was a whopping 63. On day 3, things slowed down a bit when we explored the city center of Amiens while our hosts were in class. The overall score was 5.5 with a platonic score of 3.5 and a romantic score of 2. On day 4, we spent the day at school with our hosts again. The platonic score was 54 and the romantic score was 17.5, totaling to an overall score of 71.5. On day 5, we spent the day in Paris. The platonic score was 10 and the romantic score was 37.5, totaling to an overall score of 47.5. On day 6, we spent the day at school. This was the day when I first witnessed a 5 on the romantic PDA scale, and of course it was the common culprits, eating each other's faces off during passing period. The platonic score was 43.5 and the romantic score was 26, except every single romantic display of affection I saw was just that one couple, so that's kind of crazy. Anywho, the overall score was 69.5. Finally, on day 7, I watched a handball match, went bowling, and then went out for dinner. The platonic score was 40 and the romantic score was 3, totaling to an overall score of 43. Watching people is one thing, but to truly get a good understanding of the cultural implications of public displays of affection in France and in the US, I actually had to talk to people. First, I asked what level of affection they thought was acceptable for people to show in public, whether it be romantic or platonic. Here's what they had to say.
En vrai, ça dépend. Enfin, quand il y a des personnes qui se connaissent, elles se font un câlin dans la rue, des bisous, des fois c'est très envahissant. Mais sinon, même des gens, des connaissances, ils se font la bise, et voilà. Pour les amis, bah, nous, en tant qu'amis, avec mes amis ici présents, on se check. C'est une marque d'affection un peu.
En public, ça dépend à quelle personne on veut montrer de l'affection. Si c'est une personne qu'on ne connaît pas, ben, on peut juste dire bonjour comme ça avec la main. Ou si c'est nos amis ou notre famille, on peut faire soit la bise, soit un câlin, soit des bisous. Pour les petites amies, c'est un bisou dans la bouche.
Ok.
Yes. Les Français, ils font beaucoup ça. Ils se font des bisous dans la bouche et tout pour les petites amies. Mais sinon, des câlins, tout ça.
You know, in public, I think it's okay if people hold hands or maybe occasionally hug. I think back in high school when sometimes people would make out in the hallways and that wasn't very acceptable. Really, that's kind of gross.
Next, I asked how often they observed public displays of affection.
Bah, en vrai, partout, hein. Tout le temps, il y en a, tout le monde se fait la bise partout. Enfin, quand on sort, on voit partout.
Pas beaucoup. Parce que moi, j'aime pas ça. J'aime pas trop ça. Mais les Français, en général, ils font beaucoup ça. Ils sont très tactiles entre eux.
Okay. Then I asked how often they engage in public displays of affection.
En vrai, ouais. En vrai, je suis pas trop, je montre pas trop d'affection, tout ça. Mais quand il faut faire la bise à quelqu'un dans la rue, bah, ça me dérange pas. Enfin, quelqu'un que je connais quand même.
Moi, pas beaucoup. Ça dépend avec quel genre de personne. Par exemple, avec ma famille, oui, on peut se faire des bisous, des câlins, la bise, etc. Avec mes amis, on se fait un check, ça va. On se dit bonjour, juste simplement comme ça, avec la bouche.
We handshake, but you know, we also fist bump. Men fist bump these days. I shake when I meet people at other more social events, you know, like if I'm meeting your friends' parents or something like that, I might shake their hand.
Finally, I asked if they believe that public displays of affection are more or less common in the United States than they are in France.
Bah, en vrai, je sais pas. Mais je pense que la comparaison entre la France et les États-Unis, je pense qu'en France, il y a plus de marques d'affection publiques qu'aux États-Unis. Après, je sais pas. Mais moi, je trouve pas ça dérangeant.
Aux États-Unis, personnellement, je suis jamais partie aux États-Unis pour savoir. Mais je pense que oui, ce serait acceptable, mais pas à un haut niveau. Parce que on ne connaît pas vraiment les personnes. Peut-être aux États-Unis, ça se dit juste bonjour comme ça. Je sais pas. Mais je pense que oui, ça peut s'accepter, mais à un petit niveau.
Well, I think based on the movies that I've seen, I would have to think that people probably are more accepting in France. Maybe when I've been on vacation, you see more of it because people are freer and they're on vacation. Whereas where we live, people don't take a vacation here in Oklahoma very often, you know. So maybe people are more relaxed in France, and even French people are maybe more carefree and less worried about everyday life. So maybe I feel like people are more free and emotional. In France, you see more touching.
Now that we've collected all the information, let's do some analysis.
While the interviews provided a little bit of clarity for me, I think the shining star of this project
was really the observation portion. If you look at the big stats, as I like to call them, you can tell that there's a huge difference between the PDA scores in the US and the PDA scores in France. And to make sure that wasn't just because I don't go out enough in the US, I took my busiest day and multiplied it by 7 to simulate an overall PDA score that would be more representative of if I had gone out more. And the overall PDA score that I got for France is almost 4 times larger still. So I think that really says something. Now, let's try and think of some reasons why. Even after spending 2 weeks in France and watching people like a serial killer, I can't truly be sure of the reasons why French people are so much more comfortable with PDA than people in the US are, but if I had to guess, I would say it probably goes back to the puritanical beginnings of the US when the Pilgrims came over, and their very conservative ideologies that have just left a lasting impact on the American people. So pretty much, it's all the Pilgrims' fault, and they made it weird. Thank you. All in all, even though there's an obvious difference in tolerance for PDA in France compared to in the US, it's important to remember that that doesn't mean one culture is more loving than the other, but rather that there are many ways that we can show our love to one another, which may be affected by deeper cultural understandings and nuances. So, if you take nothing else out of this, just remember to spread a little love. Thank you so much for watching. Au revoir!
I was in France for 2 weeks, and then when I was actually editing it, it took a long time. It took probably maybe 14 or 15 hours to get to this point.
What did you consider romantic PDA versus platonic?
Okay, so I was gonna explain this and then I ran out of time in the video, but romantic would be obviously between people in a romantic relationship or people that seemed obviously in a romantic relationship, and then the scales were kind of different. So a 1 for that one, I think I counted holding hands was a 1 on the romantic scale, and then a 5 was you can probably guess what a 5 was, getting up on each other in public. So that was crazy. I witnessed that a couple times. And then platonic scale, I can't remember, I think a handshake was a 1 on the platonic scale, and then a 5 was probably kissing your friends, which I also saw friends kiss each other, and I was like, that's really crazy. You guys are friends, what are you doing? And it was I thought it would be girls. No, it was boys. They would kiss each other. It's crazy. Okay. They would try to kiss each other on the lips, but I did see them kiss each other on the cheek a lot. Not just to greet each other, they would grab each other by the face and I was oh my goodness. So that was crazy.
I think some people do that here.
They would also they were interesting fellas. I forgot what the question was. I just started yapping. Oh yeah. Okay, so how did I determine? So if something seemed I kind of just had to use my best judgment to guess if it was romantic or platonic. There were a couple that I was oh, I'm not sure. But for the most part, it was fairly obvious because when people were in a relationship, they were very open about it and very touchy and kissy, and I was okay, you guys probably aren't friends. But the people I did know that were certainly friends because they were hosts or host friends that I spent a lot of time with, then I was okay, well I know you're friends and this is kind of crazy for friends to be doing. So that's that.